Thanks everyone for joining in today on our Insidexploration Twitter Spaces. I'm Mike Coyle, your host, and today with us we have Enrico Di Cesare, the VP of Research and Development for St. George Eco Mining, listed on the CSE under SX and the OTC under SXOOF. Enrico, thanks for joining me today, buddy.
It's nice to be here, Mike.
Yeah, I'm glad we're not experiencing technical difficulties today.
Well, I think that's behind us now. I think we've got this down packed.
Indeed. All right. So, Enrico, 14 months ago, you announced the entry into the battery recycling space. You had a patent for a process of mineral recoveries. And 14 months later, you're almost at the point where you're ready to roll things out. So my first question to you is going to be, how do you differ from other battery recyclers that have emerged in the market today?
Okay, so that's a really good question. Anybody listening to some of the press releases and documents that St. George has put out have had an angle with lithium and, of course, nickel. Where we're really different is that we're trying to design the process in a way that if tomorrow morning there were no batteries, I can take a resource and put it through. So we guarantee the customer with the lithium he needs or she needs, and the same thing with the nickel. And on top of that, we're doing this in an eco-friendly way where we're trying to minimize any losses of the chemicals, which is usually mainly the acid, and making viable byproducts such as fertilizer.
So talk to me about why nickel cadmium. I understand there's not really going to be a supply of batteries, but you've chosen to take the approach of focusing on nickel cadmium and lithium iron phosphate batteries for the time being. Talk about that decision and how you came to it.
Yeah, so I think everybody's heard comments in the industry of not having enough nickel for the battery industry. And it's pretty clear today that lithium iron phosphate is still around for a little while longer. And lithium, even though there's different variations of it, will probably be around in some form or another in all batteries. So we picked two that were critical in the supply chain and also complementary to our own resources and other people's resources of lithium. So that was really the strategy there. And it also complements that it's other than the front end of segregating battery materials, be it steel, aluminum, plastic, copper, etc. The back end is very similar for each one of those lines.
But you've come up with some really innovative ways to deal with some of your products outside of traditional means. So, and when I say that, I mean, you've recently announced some hydrogen production. We're not going to get into the hydrogen today, but this is just an example of one of those things that you're doing a little bit differently. So you're taking some of the stuff that you segregate and you turn it into hydrogen. And then there's the nickel ingots. I want to touch on those a little bit because those ingots are really interesting, and I don't think people really grasp the whole concept behind it. So talk about the idea and what it really means to the industry to be able to produce an ingot with a preset chemistry.
Yeah, so one of the things that happens in what is mainly the cathode material for a nickel cadmium battery. It's overly simplistic. It's 50% nickel, 50% cadmium, outside of all the other stuff that everybody has, which is steel, aluminum, graphite, etc. What we've done there is we started saying, well, do we put it into acid like everybody else, or can we avoid that and create two products, a pure nickel and a cadmium byproduct? When we know that the future of the nickel industry is no cadmium. But in our case, we can make the pure nickel, send cadmium, for example, to the pigment industry and other sources or uses that we're working on still. But the main focus was, can we do something with a pure nickel and make it more compact, and which we've done. And we're going to continue doing the work, and we'll be announcing some of those results in the future.
So, in the instance of a nickel cadmium battery, or let's just drift away from that. Let's talk about an EV battery for a second. These EV batteries, the nickel compounds are made up of certain molecular structures, if you will. You could speak to this more eloquently than I can, but if you don't have to break those down and put them into acid, or put them into acid and break them all down, only to have to rebuild them later, what kind of a cost savings are you really talking about when you
Okay.
do this?
Yeah. So I don't know how much listeners know about this, but the people, for example, making lithium iron phosphate cathode material, they're basically bringing in lithium, they're bringing in the iron, they're bringing in the phosphate to make the LiFePO4 material, and then that gets blended in with graphite, and it goes on to the battery maker. So one of the things that's being done now is, what if we recreated LiFeP, or at least a portion of that, and make the whole process simpler, where there's very little adjustment to be done. So that's one of the things that is going on. We took a step back just to make sure that we hadn't overlooked something, and those trials are on way now. But we believe that anything that eliminates extra steps and complements the industry, including making a material that can go straight to the battery maker versus going to someone who has to make the compound of the cathode, would be a benefit.
Now, have you identified suppliers and buyers already in talks with anybody that you can kind of speak to, or is that very hush hush for now?
Well, that's hush hush, and there's also, because we're rethinking things, what you have to also do is, who's your friend or potential friend, and who's your competitor, right? So tomorrow morning, you're eliminating the step of LiFeP 04, for example. Those people aren't going to be your friend, right? So, or you're either buying somebody, but right now that's part of the thought process. The only
Okay.
thing I can say is we will not be competing with battery makers. We just want to be a complement to the battery industry.
I think that's pretty well understood by the market at this point. So, Enrico, nickel cadmium batteries come with some environmental issues and risks. Can you speak about those and how you are trying to mitigate those risks as part of your business plan?
Yeah, so it's not the nickel that scares people; it's the cadmium, and there's two ways to recover it. Um, we'll finalize that shortly. But yeah, so we have a very strong strategy on the cadmium, which separates it from the nickel, and then we'll send that to whoever wants the cadmium, and we'll continue treating the nickel as a
Okay.
metal or as a battery cathode material.
So when you're looking at building these battery recycling facilities, there's been a few places tabled, Bakemo being one, and then you've talked about Contrecoeur, and you were in Hamilton recently, and I think Hamilton makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. I mean, you've got the population base there that you touched on in your presentation earlier in the week, and you've also got a steel industry that I think complements what you're doing quite nicely. Can you talk to how the steel industry complements what you're working on right now in Hamilton, particularly, or Southern Ontario for that matter?
Well, when you look at Southern Ontario to start with, obviously there's a need or a place for battery materials and battery recycling. Let's be clear there. So it goes by population, right? And when you scrap a car or have an accident, no matter what, wherever there's a higher population, the percentages of the same accident occurring will happen more often, right? So there's going to be, and more cars that go to the recycling bin after a 10-year cycle, for example. So Southern Ontario makes a lot of sense, and you're close to a lot of a large American population. That can be said for other centers, be it like close to Montreal, and then you can go and say you can have the same thing on the West Coast, and on and on and on. Like, we can be strategic about this. Why Hamilton was intriguing for another reason, besides being close to Toronto, was we were looking at the synergies with what people consider a dirty industry, which is steel. And really, the dirty name comes from coke making, where you're not combusting the coal like in a thermal power plant, like you see in Nova Scotia, for example, or New Brunswick. In this case, you have a lot of byproducts, and coincidentally, that gas cleaning of the byproducts are actually the raw materials that we need to make lithium or battery recycling. So those are very intriguing for us, and we're looking at that. We don't want to say more than that, other than that. Obviously, there's a lot of criteria when you look at sites. For example, when you hear Baie-Comeau, would it make sense for Baie-Comeau to be a nickel hub for St. George? Absolutely. You've heard about the resources. But when you talk about battery recycling, you're looking at populations, you're looking at where you're going to get your chemicals from. Can you be a complement versus a competitor? We think we can be a complement to the steel industry, as one example.
I mean, that opens up shipping routes as well from deep sea ports and stuff. Well, anywhere along the North Shore really opens you up. But some places are a little busier than others, and I think that's why Baie-Comeau looks like an attractive option for building it. Now, you've stepped away from the initial building that you were looking at. Talk about why, because I think people are missing this. I think buildings could be had for cheaper, but I'll let you elaborate on this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the type of buildings you're looking at for battery recycling can be built relatively inexpensively. You're looking at a front end for batteries that segregates materials. So it's not like you're going to have major cranes being supported by pillars and things like that. You can have like prefab buildings relatively cheaply. And then the rest is by pipe. If you're using acids, for example, which make the flow go from one section to the other. So your buildings are not that expensive. And what we're trying to do now is relatively compact processes. So the building is the least of our concerns. It's more about getting the right locations with the right infrastructure and addressing the key performance indicators of what you need for each type of battery or metal.
So a prefab building runs you with a land, $1 million, $1.5 million, something like that. What's the cost of the equipment to build your modular units? Now, I understand that there could be variations. You could have smaller operations, you could have larger operations, but what's the general cost of your equipment to run your full cycle for nickel cadmium batteries? And by my understanding, we'll also be able to process hard rock, lithium, and clay as well.
So this gets to be that's a tricky question you've asked, because it covers quite a few variables. But I'll put it another way. One of the things we want to do now is we've started working with equipment vendors. We want to have something off the shelf that's modular. So let's just touch batteries for a second. It doesn't matter how many tons a year you want to process, 10, 20, 200,000. What's the ideal modular size for each type of equipment? So if your shredder is going to be, I don't know, let's make up something, 100,000 tons, then you're designing that, and it's just multiples of that going around. The back end, it's what is the ideal hydrometallurgical sizing, and then you've eliminated the risks, because after that, instead of engineering or re-engineering, what we'll be doing is mixing and matching of our modules off the shelf, and then it's just bolting down and quick connects, which allows us to pre-assemble and plan for easy connections and installations in the industry. So that's the key there. The other part of it is that obviously, if you were feeding a resource to your system, the front end changes. You're not doing shredding and segregating anymore. You're doing much more of a leaching to get into the system, but larger volumes going in than if you were doing battery recycling, for example. What is the ideal size for a lithium hydroxide plant? When you take that into account, generally for brines, it's 20,000 tons, for example. Okay. Could we do it for less with what we're doing? The answer is yes, but is it ideal? So right now we're still at 20,000 tons of lithium hydroxide in its dry form. So that's actually more than that. It's about 50,000 tons when you add the OH and the H2O attached to it. Okay, so that's where we are with that, and we're progressing in a way that's a little bit different because we want to be able to roll out efficiently and quickly afterwards with our preferred vendors.
So to be clear, a lot of people, when they're in the R&D phase and they're doing their bench testing, scalability is always a big concern. Can you scale this up? But by the sounds of the way you talk about this and conversations we've had prior to this, there's not going to be any issues with scalability with your process, is there?
No, that is very good comment. And one of the reasons why we're already in discussions with vendors, equipment vendors, is what is off the shelf, what exists. The minute you start to reinvent anything or ask a vendor to design something differently, you're adding risk, even if the actual item doesn't have a risk. So what we're trying to do is eliminate anything that has any type of risk. So all the equipment that can be allowed into our process exists already. The only thing that's different is the way they brought together for the objectives of the process.
I'm glad you brought that up because I want to touch base on the patents. Now, you originally filed these, back in 2020? You made some advancements last year where they're being reviewed in multiple countries. As recently as last week or the week before, the US is now reviewing it. Where do you stand with these patents? When could investors or shareholders alike hope to see the finalization of the patents so you could say, nobody can copy us now? We're ready to go. We have the patent secured, done, fine.
So the most important for shareholders and for St. George is filing date, so that you can protect yourself as other people come in and try to copy or file things that you've already filed. The speed is less important than the filing date. You might know, I have an iron making patent that started in 2013. I only got it in 2021. But
wow.
What I did was, do you have a right to operate? Check. Okay, you get that validated. Then you go into, did you pass the international patent process? The answer is yes. Check. Okay, then you pick your countries. Now, each country, what a lot of people don't know is each country gets to drill you and question you and challenge you and get clarifications. And each one will go at a different path and speed. So tomorrow, you might get a country that you weren't even planning on getting as your priority, but that one comes in first. For us, obviously, being in Canada and dealing with the USA, you have to cover Canada and USA as a priority. And then you have all your other countries. So the most important is the process, and the methodology is the right way. And you just go with it and don't try to accelerate it as such. After any amendments to your own patents will go a lot faster. So that's the other thing that provides people with inaccurate measures of speed. So, for example, if Mike has a patent and he does an improvement to the art and it's still his own patent, he's going to get it a lot faster than if he's starting from zero, going through the whole audit process.
So that was going to be my next question, Enrico, is at what point are you going to have to update your patents? Because originally your patent was for a process of mineral recoveries, which started with clays and hard rocks to get lithium. However, a lot of what you were doing already covered the battery recycling organically. However, do you need to update these patents or file updates for these patents with regards to the work you've done over the last 14 months? Because by what I could see, you've made some breakthroughs with aluminum, you've made breakthroughs with hydrogen, you've made breakthroughs with recovery rates, and it all looks really good. But when can we expect to see an update to that patent?
So we've already filed for an upgrade to the prior art. And one of
Okay.
the things that'll be covered, of course, is the improvements to lithium. And we're also planning on adding the recovery, or not breaking up all of the elements and recovering the mass as it would go back into a battery as one of the parallel items. The other part of that is, we've added alumina, high purity alumina, and considering that you got to 97% without any effort to purification, it won't be long for us to be at 99 or 99.9%. But even at 97, that becomes a pretty interesting product that comes with all lithium, right? So every 20,000 tons of lithium hydroxide will have about 40,000 tons of alumina. That goes to
That effectively doesn't that effectively double the value of your deposit if you can get alumina with the lithium?
yeah. Well, look, I don't want to create too high of expectations, but what I will say is that the alumina is a nice value adder. People have been chasing this or trying to do projects that people have heard of in Canada not that long ago. In our case, we're doing this as a byproduct without an effort. You have to always remember what you were trying to produce, which is the lithium. But anytime you do something, be it to purify, and it's saleable, in effect, you've improved your economics. And that's where the fertilizer comes in too. Like if you're going to neutralize something or throw it away, that's a cost. If you turn it into something saleable like fertilizer, that helps your bottom line or eliminates the cost of that chemical, right? So
Talk
go ahead.
Sorry, Enrico, talk about that a little bit, because this is something that I've shared with people individually in the waste. So when you're using acids to extract these critical minerals that you are, your waste product is often saturated with these acids. If I'm saying this wrong, step in and correct me. But with your process, you're able to mitigate some of that waste. Talk about it.
Yeah, so for example, sulfuric acid is commonly used in many metals, right? If you go to any facility, even producing zinc, you'll see huge landfills, which is sulfuric acid waste that are neutralized into what I call dirty gypsum. If it was a clean gypsum, it would be in your drywall, for example. But if you just consumed acid and you consume chemicals to neutralize it, and then you pay to landfill it, and you pay to put a topsoil and plant grass or plants or trees, those are costs, right? If your chemicals, instead of being something to go to landfill and neutralized, are turned into a value-added fertilizer, like what you use, for example, when you do gardening or fertilize your grass, which it's that time of year. We're getting to the fertilizing of grass. When you're fertilizing your grass, just think that this could be St. George's waste stream that you're using.
It's incredible. So I guess this is why this government took notice, have a government grant. So since we're talking about the fertilizers, let's talk about the fertilizers. How is that progressing? And are you seeing any interest from any industry players on this front?
Well, the main focus again is what we were trying to do, which is like the lithium and the nickel. But if we take a step back in parallel, why not get the right chemistries for, let's say, a tomato or a cucumber or grass or wheat or corn, right? So that's what we're doing in parallel, and we'll review that and then do those trials with the pilot plant.
Is this a vertical that's going to be run individually from everything else that you're doing? Frank kind of put a picture out there of you and Sabin and himself having a meeting, and it showed a few different verticals that you're looking to pursue, and it looked like that fertilizer was one of them.
Yeah, so that when you're taking the lithium out, let's just touch lithium for a second as an example. Once you've got your lithium circuit and it's going on to make a product, be it carbonate or hydroxide for the industry, a lot of the acid gets recirculated back to the original leach. but there's portions that would go out as a pipe to the fertilizer plant. Now, at the fertilizer plant, what do I need to add to make it perfect, right? So it's phosphate, potassium. For those who don't know, when you're buying a bag of fertilizer for your grass, you see 10, 10, 10 or 30, 30, 30. And they don't even know what that means, but it's really phosphate, nitrates, and potassium, okay? And you can look at the details. A lot don't know that 70% is actually limestone just to adjust the pH for your grass, but that's another topic. So the whole point is that the fertilizer plant, once that goes in and you have your nitrates, what prevents us from making a specific chemistry for a specific industry, okay? And it doesn't matter if it's pomegranates and almonds, where they deplete the ground of magnesium. It doesn't matter if it's just plainly for ordinary grass and so on. Let's all agree that you've recovered the cost of your nitric acid if it goes to fertilizer, where you get to use it twice. Once to recover your lithium, and two, to make a final product with your byproduct.
It's brilliant. I commend you on your efforts on that front. All right, this all derived from lithium. I'm going to kind of cap it off here with you, Enrico. I'll ask you a couple more questions regarding lithium and spodumene, and then I'm going to ask Frank, since I see that he's listening, to hop in here and answer some of the other questions that I don't think are necessarily suited towards you. So, lithium processing from spodumene. This sounds really great. I mean, you can have some really high percentages of lithium, plus you're able to recuperate the aluminum at the same time, which is a fantastic development. Clearly, it's brought some interest because you have a few NDAs on that front. But let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the spodumene processing, or lepidolite. And there was another mineral that you said you could do this with. I'll get you to talk about that. But Enrico, what kind of supply is there? Let's just stay in Quebec alone. I know the Quebec government sunk like $4 billion into the lithium industry in the last 10 years, and nobody's ever been like hugely successful in this space. But here you are. You have a claim to have a really awesome technology to be able to get that lithium out of there. When do you see this all coming together for the lithium? Because this is where it all started. So when are you going to be ready to roll that out? Maybe don't give me an exact timeline, but where are you at with it right now?
So that's where what we've done is we've done bench testing. We're pretty pleased with the results. We feel that's pretty good. But before you can go and tell people that have spent, and I want to be clear, the $4 billion is investment in Quebec. Of course, the government was part of it, in case they're listening and they criticize the number. But $4 billion has been spent most likely in Quebec and has gone nowhere. There's a lot of spodumene around the world. One of the reasons it didn't take off was it's competing with brines. And just remember, the brines have the chemicals already in there. It's basically salt water, so the chlorides are already there. So when you're neutralizing things and you're losing chlorides, which go to waste, it's less of a problem than when you're putting acid in and neutralizing it and throwing it to waste. So that's one of the issues. Now, most good spodumene, for example, resources range from 0.8 to 1% Li2O. Okay, there's a lot of those around the world, and they all have the same challenges, which was everybody was looking at it a specific way. And one of the reasons we took a step back and said, can we do this a little differently and not have the acid challenge? And the answer was yes. And then we started moving forward. Then what we did was we said, well, there's so many forms of hard rocks out there. As you know, we've touched clay, we've touched spodumene, hard rocks, and then we looked at lepidolite. And in all cases, we were successful with the approach that we took. So that's very exciting, that there will be no shortage of hard rock resources to supply the world's needs of lithium, to complement the brines. Yeah, go ahead.
So as Enrico Di Cesare, you can go out there tomorrow and find a supplier for the spodumene with ease, or is this something that's still, you're unclear where you would get those resources?
There's a lot of resources out there. If tomorrow morning you would be buying people's concentrates, and you could also simplify their purification stages. Just keep in mind that when you use an acid that's quite aggressive, all the impurities go into solution, and those impurities can hamper the making high purity lithium hydroxide or carbonate. And if you can come along and have a selective leach that leaves things like iron behind or nickel behind, for example, you're ahead of the game. And then your purification stages are a lot simpler. And then if you don't have the extra challenge of trying to keep your chemical costs down because you're making fertilizer, just think of it as a plant that's making alumina, fertilizer, and lithium all in one. Yeah, you're putting a bit of extra for the fertilizer plant, but is it really that bad of a problem if you've solved your chemical issues? And because the mine will be reduced in cost, because you don't have to go through the same efforts of extra grinding and purification and extra cleaning stages in your flotation circuits, maybe you save the miner some costs. So we don't believe there'll be a shortage of actual resources to supply that. The issue was never the resources, it was economically recovering the lithium from the resources in a green way.
So
I'm going to re-emphasize green because we haven't mentioned it.
Am I wrong in saying, based on your response there, that you would be more looking to license a technology like this, or would you be building plants to accommodate this under your own business plan?
So because of what's happened in the industry, there's multiple ways. One is we can go in and fix an existing plant that maybe spent a couple of $1 million and it's not viable. The other is and become partners. Another is licensing it, and another is putting the back end next to a mine. All options are possible. And one day, if St. George is in a position of strength, who says you can't buy less efficient operations and turn them around?
That's a good outlook. All right. Well, we haven't heard from Frank yet. I've also extended an invite to Herb to jump in and maybe talk about some of the exploration projects. But in the interim, Enrico, what do you think is going to be the first to market for St. George Eco Mining?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I'd like to have the flag up for resources for lithium, and I'd like to have the flag up for lithium batteries towards the end of this year to say we're open for business and let's start rolling out. And in parallel to that, nickel is still advancing, and you all know that we like nickel. We don't have a choice because we have our resources, but it's also one of the strategic ones for the growth of the industry. So which one will be first? I would say that we're working on all three at the same time. And the strategy was nickel follows the resources, what we're doing with the batteries, and what we're doing with battery recycling for lithium follows what the industry does for resources. So in many ways, they're coming at the same time. For each case. Go ahead.
Let's talk financing. In particular, you have a lot of things that are very attractive as the economy goes to greener technologies, and you have a lot of greener technologies via your process. The government has been taking part with Bécancour and a battery park there. They've been investing money in some other companies. I won't mention names, but the money is certainly there. It's certainly being thrown around your industry. I mean, there's got to be a point where St. George wants to be in the headlines saying the Quebec government or the Ontario government or hell, even the US government wants to throw some money at St. George Eco Mining to partake in what looks like a very promising technology. Give me some idea, feedback, or where you're at with approaching the government. Are you ready to get there yet, or you still have a few things to button up?
Well, we probably took longer than we should. Like, we should just ask for the money, but we wanted to have things in order to basically ask in a responsible way. We will be applying for all the grant monies at the larger scale, like some of the projects you mentioned, because we feel we're a complement to the industry, and we do have an innovative approach to it that leads to greener and more economical processes. So there's two facets. For example, if you're looking at what Canada supports, it's not just innovation, but it's also, are you focused on being greener and cleaner? And so the innovation is there, check, and the greener and cleaner is there too, so check. So we feel we'll meet all the criteria. So that's over the next this month. We want to fill out our applications and apply. And before people get too excited, do we need those? No, but nice to have, sure. But they take 6 to 9 months to get. We will be continuing to progress with or without them.
But to be clear, I mean, we've had conversations in the past where you've already initiated some of these conversations. So are we still looking at a 6 to 9 month timeline to get a government?
There's the big dollars that follow what I call equipment as well. And there's the dollars that we already have and we've been working with. A lot of people, I think, don't realize that what we've been doing with, because we have two firms working with us, and one of them is basically under full grants. Okay, so it's a small portion what St. George is paying compared to what we're receiving. Okay, so that's there already. What we're talking about now, to answer your question, is would we take $10-20 million if someone offered it to us? The answer is absolutely. Are we banking on that as go, no go? No, we don't need that, but we will take it. And so we'll apply for it because that's just a responsible thing to do.
That's fair. Okay, so you recently mentioned in a news release that you're looking to build out your team. So as Enrico, as part of EVSX, what kind of people are you looking for to help advance your technology? So
this is where the growth of any organization doing R&D from a lab to practical needs a variety of skill sets. So you need the scientists that have the fundamentals and can design experiments. You need the practical people who know how to run an operation and not kill anybody in the process and build it. And then you also have the, not to minimize anything, but let's call it technicians who actually do the work with their hands, right? So you're going to have a variety of a team, and we're at that stage where we're going to start adding complementary pieces to the process developers.
Excellent. Okay, Enrico, it looks like Frank has joined us. I really appreciate you taking the time on a Sunday morning, especially to jump in here and give us some feedback. But I'm going to transfer over to Frank because some of the questions that I've received from shareholders are a little bit more oriented towards him. So thank you again very much, Enrico, and hope to get you back on one of these soon.
Talk to you later. Cheers.
Cheers. All right, Frank, thanks for joining me.
Hello. Good morning.
How you feeling this morning? Ready for some tough questions?
Let's go. Let's do it. Let's take the bandage out in one shot.
All right. So, I'm sure you've seen some of the chatter. I'm sure you've received some emails. I'm going to address a few of these. Don't feel obligated to answer them. I know some can be a little bit frustrating at times, but let's talk volume, cash flow, revenue projections. I know it's hard to give these things, and really when you offer guidance, people take that twisted on you. But what are you looking at for cash flow, revenues, projections, Frank, if you can?
I'm going to go further on this, that it's not a matter of being tough. It's a matter of having an army of CPA and CFA to actually prepare the documentation, and then putting yourself at risk of being shut down and seized trade by the regulators because they don't agree with your numbers. Like if you look at the Fortune 500, it's a big corporate expense that they have really independent people constantly reviewing every single quarter to be able to kind of make projection, which they might miss or not. And then when they miss it, it's a mess. And then you get a bunch of the some of the biggest company out there that have stopped doing these forward-looking statements and these projections. So at our level, with our current listing, we won't do that. We won't do revenue projection. We won't do cash flow projection. We can do it probably on investor calls after every quarter, but you're not going to have projections further than 3 months with us. The main reason is we won't have a company if we do that. Like we're going to open ourselves to, there's no way we're going to spend 50% of our corporate resource to make projection about, how much money is going to come in on the other, by the door. It is way too risky to do that. There might be other juniors or micro cap that are doing projection. They might be doing it on the OTC, where there's no regulation, but we're heavily regulated. Like we speak with regulators multiple times a month, and they come into the press release, for example, that they review. Every single press release that have barely anything material is reviewed by them. And often they ask us, well, this sounds forward-looking. This sounds like a projection. And you know what they mean? Take it out. They don't want us to do it. It's that simple. So I don't know how many times I'm going to have to say it, Mike, but stop asking. Not you, but I mean in general, because we can't. Even if we would like to do it, we cannot give these projection out.
I think what people fail to understand is that you're not operating and generating revenue yet, but when you are, it's a lot easier for a company that's currently generating revenue to give guidance on revenue projections for the year following. And that's where you'll see a lot of revenue projections, not so much with a microcap startup R&D company that you are right now.
Well, if you have 10 clients and you have long-term contract, you have a general idea how much money they're going to give you. So you can give some ballpark figures, and I'm okay with that. But until then, it's like the guy that keeps sending me texts, and he needs to stop, by the way, asking me, why don't we drill where the nickel is? And why don't we drill where the gold is? It's like, if it was this simple, we wouldn't even be in that business. But that's some of the funniest it's funny, but at the same time, it's not funny because it's the kind of message we keep getting, and there's always different character. It's not always the same person that just changes his name or his fake email. But we get harassed, and Herb gets that also, and Enrico also, by people that ask us these questions. And you can't answer stupid. That at one point, I don't have an answer for that, apart from stop asking.
Bear in mind, Frank, a lot of the people that are invested in St. George come from tech or the blockchain world, which you kind of caused a lot of turmoil in 2018. So a lot of these people aren't necessarily mining focused and don't understand the rigmarole of the mining industry.
No, I'm 100% with you on this. Yeah. I think that we need to do a lot more communication. That might be another question of yours coming down, but because I'm getting a lot of these questions, but we need to do a lot more communication, and a lot of it is education. It's not about for one of the biggest questions we're getting for the last few weeks is, why did you found like a big discovery like Manicouagan and it's not some major that found it? If you look at some of the majors we're in touch with a lot of majors. They like to talk to junior and to microcap explorer because they want to know if we're about to discover something so that they can buy us for cheap, but at the same time, for us, it's good because we get a good exchange of information with them. And sometimes we get exposed to suppliers, or they always give us a little bit. It's 90-10, I would say. 90% we're giving them information, and 10% they're giving us crumbs. But sometimes the crumbs are valuable, and you'll get like a suppliers or some product or service that you wouldn't be able to get access otherwise. So it's an abusive relationship with the majors, the major mining company, but it's still worth it for us. But if you look at their budget for exploration, some of them have smaller budget than we do, as that Saint George has. So that tells you why they didn't discover Manicouagan.
I'm glad you said that, because I wanted to chime in here and just highlight something. I think a lot of people that don't come from the mining industry don't understand the whole process and how it works. And if you're an exploration company, you're putting the money into the ground to de-risk the project. Majors don't do this. They don't go in and de-risk a project for themselves. They allow a junior company like a St. George or other exploration companies to go in there, spend the capital that's needed to define a 43-101 compliant resource, and then the majors come in. So as you progress Manicouagan or Julie or Stuk for that matter, this is where majors might start taking interest, but they're not going to go and buy this project on a whim just because you hit a bunch of really great holes in the beginning. They want de-risk, the project de-risk. Okay, Frank, let's jump away from that for a second. Exchange listing. You're on the CSE, and in the common market, the CSE isn't exactly viewed as like your top tier exchange listing. Is there down the road maybe an opportunity for St. George to move over to the TSX venture, or if you become very successful with the battery recycling and Manicouagan, jump right into the TSX?
The logical progression would be to list on a bigger exchange, and that would be the TSX. You don't want to go to the TSX venture and pay $1 million a year just to be listed. In our situation, with the level of activity we have, we would have constant review, constant fees for these review. You have to look at, you raise money, for example, and we've raised what? Probably around a little bit in excess of 15-16 million last year. The TSX venture charge you two-person fees for the privilege of raising money on their exchange. They don't raise the money for you. They don't help you. They just tax you two-person. The CSC doesn't do that. That's not nothing. That's right there, $300,000 that we can put towards something else, and that's so far. That's less than the equipment that's more than the equipment we bought for the pilot plant. It's significant in their case. And so, yes, definitely. TSX big board, that's something that you have to look at down the road. But at the same time, with all the vertical we have, the TSX has its own culture. And the first thing they would ask us is, what's your business model? And what's your business silo? And probably would force us either to abandon or to split the company. And some of these silos might be splittable, but it might be premature to split them now. I'm a big fan in my case and that's personal. When I say that, I'm not engaging the company here. Let's open that bracket. I'm a big fan to wait and really look at solid exchange in Europe and in the United States prior to move to the TSX. So to keep the CSC as a primary, but really move to some exchange in the US that's more solid, and in Europe some solid exchange also.
I like the sound of an American listing on a more solid platform. That would open the door for a lot more volume. That's for sure. Okay, we'll keep an eye on that. And I've got a few about Paul Pelosi. Last time we talked, though, we kind of talked about Paul and what he brings to the table. I'm just going to throw this at you just because, let's talk about Paul Pelosi, his effect, because I've gotten a lot of questions about it. Is he advocating in the United States for you right now? And is he going to be a key factor in where and how and when you build in the United States?
Well, the first thing is there's certain fundamental things that are important for EVSX. I would keep Paul away from the global St. George and really focus him where he's active, which is EVSX. And there are certain fundamental things that he did already. So the investment of onboarding him has already paid off for us. Our biggest issue early on was access to batteries. And that's going to be the issue for a lot of people in the industry. I spoke last week with probably one of the most, the person who did one of the biggest discovery in nickel in the last 30 years. And he was in Toulouse, France, and just happened to be able to connect with him via somebody else. And the first comment he made was when I pitched him the EVSX, he said, "I'm not interested. There will be no EV battery available for the next 15 years. And I said, yeah, we agree with that. Let me explain what we really do. And the reality here is that we have to go out and create the demand or create the market for our product. We have to go out and tell people in California, for example, you're currently collecting 5-10% of the batteries, the nickel cadmium. There's a crazy amount of these batteries in landfill. Stop doing that. We'll pick it up from you, and let's figure out what kind of programs we can put together to go and get more of them out of people's garbage. Now, there's company out there. There's a initiative like, for example, Call to Recycle, active in California, active in different other states, active in Quebec and in Ontario. And they are potentially a big suppliers of batteries for us, and have a massive storage of these batteries because it's difficult to find a green a processor of these batteries. But still, there's so much they can do. But I can go to the Boy Scout, for example, or some cancer charity or a little league in California and tell them we're sanctioned by the state, by the California state, and we want to send you out as a financing activity, door to door. Go collect these nickel cadmium batteries from power tools that don't work anymore. Go educate people that there's a value in it, and that we'll collect it. We'll collect these small batteries door to door, and then we'll do a profit sharing with these associations. For us, if we go get 1%, 2% of the battery, and we intercept them before they go to the landfill, that's a massive amount of batteries. And that's also a massive amount of nickel being produced, because that's the goal. The goal is not to romantically go and process EV batteries. The goal is to sell nickel. The goal is to sell cobalt, is to sell commodity. That's where the money is. The money is not in dismantling EV battery or buying EV batteries, to sell the commodity at the end. And people tend to lose focus here. And I've got a lot of these questions where people are they're mad at us because we're not going to do EV battery. Well, you need to have these batteries available. They'll be available down the road. But at the same time, if we never ever touch EV battery in the existence of this company in the next 50 years, but we process 10% of all the nickel cadmium battery that are put out in the market and then recycled, we're going to sell more nickel than some of the biggest mines. So that you have to keep thinking, what's the end goal, not the romantic aspect of taking care of EV batteries. Now, coming back to Paul, sorry, I didn't want to avoid that question.
That's okay.
How do you get that certification from the Californian state? Well, it's a long process. It's a few years down the road, or it's one phone call to his fake cousin, who's the governor. So that's the reality is you get Paul on the phone. I can call people. Sometimes I'm lucky. I'm very good, and I'm very charming on the phone with the gatekeeper. Sometimes I get through and I'm able to talk to someone. But if you have Paul Pelosi calling, often he's just texting the person, say, when are you available? I said, well, let me ask, the person in charge of my schedule, and we'll book a call. It's totally another crowd. It's another world. And that's where Paul is very useful.
Amazing. Okay, let's move on. I got a couple more, and I see Herb is willing to chime in. So I'm going to get to you, Herb. We're going to talk exploration in just a minute. Thanks, guys. This is a great way to spend my Sunday morning. I'm getting all kinds of great information here. Frank, you've been criticized about PR an awful lot lately. And I think it's somewhat unfairly due because you're not at the point of the rollout. I think once you're ready to roll out, we could probably see some. But what are you doing as a company to address that concern of your shareholders?
Well, there's two type of interaction on PR, or maybe three types of interaction on PR that I get with people. In the United States, a lot of the people are sending us, comments that we don't know what we're doing, and we're a bunch of incompetent because they don't see on their platform the press release of the company. Now, we've tested a few different press release agencies. Keep in mind, we also have regulators telling us which press release agency we can use. And that's an important aspect. Like they want to make sure that these press release agencies have been tested for dissemination, and some of them that might be okay and distribute fairly well or disseminate fairly well in the United States would not disseminate elsewhere. And the regulators does not sanction them. Like they're not on our list we can use. Maybe we could use it or use them as a complement. But it's, myself, or I can be harsh sometimes. I'm tempted sometimes to say to these people, if you don't see our press release on your platform, and then 90% of people are seeing it, maybe it's your platform. Maybe you should stop being cheap. But at the same time, I know it's unfair. It's just because I'm getting these messages so often that we're really looking at different press release disseminators and see which one is not sanctioned by the Canadian regulators, but could become a complement to what we're doing. Sometimes what it means is that it's possible that that press release is going to come an hour later on that disseminator instead of the primary one. But it would be a way for, just as an archive, a way for the US investor to have some reference on it. Now, that's one of the aspects, of the three aspects. The other aspect I'm getting a lot of questions are literally people that want us to market and promote. Like that gentleman that told me that, PDAC is coming, PDAC being the Prospector Developer Association Conference for the people outside of the mining industry. It's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, mining and explorer convention in the world. That's in Toronto every year. And he said, you should go there and put flyers in the parking lots on the windshield of the car that are parked there.
Jesus.
And you're like, okay, that's, or they want us to buy banners in some stock forum. And the problem with that is I know you could laugh. It's true. You're going to reach some people you don't reach right now. It is a segment of the population that we might not be reaching right now. But at the same time, for the credibility of the company towards the family office, the institutionals, and the serious people, it's not going to help our credibility deficit. So that's one of the elements. And often these people, what they want, the reality is they want us to do marketing, and they're coming up with probably the word we hate to use, which is promotion. And when they say promotion, is they want us to hire some companies going to charge us 1 million shares, free trading, that either they're going to blow in the market or not, and maybe they're going to create volume, but they're going to put out all sort of YouTube video, all sort of quote-unquote analysts, which are not analysts, but they're paid right up, and they're going to make all sort of crazy projection about St. George, which at the end of the day is going to cause us more problems than the momentarily rising stock. But that's what they want. They want a rise in stock. They want a promotion on the share price to get out of the company. And we're never going to, I'm going to say that here. I'm going to say that every time we speak. We will never, ever do something like that. We'll never make these people happy. It's not going to happen. So that brings me to the third part. We are getting things that we can promote now. We're getting things that we can market, which is a product, which is a service, which is assets. We have results that we can actually put in front of people. We can go sit down with brokerage firm and make presentation, with her being able to explain the system or the model of the different assets that we have and where we're going. Same thing for Enrico. He can explain where the process is going. And we're there now. And I would say we're going to firm this up over the next 3 months. So what we've decided to do is we're right now sitting down, or not really sitting down, but we're doing Zoom calls and Teams call with marketing agencies. And we're talking about tier one marketing agencies, like the people that do commercial for IBM type of thing. They are what they're going to propose and what we're going to do, and the process we're going to do over the next months is to review everything from branding to the communication. We want to make sure that all these silos can be understood, all these business silos we have can be understood as how they interact together, how they're important to each other, how they complement each other, and that within a two-pager, uh, the a regular Joe in the street that would read that two-pager would feel more intelligent after, or more more knowledgeable, and would understand right away. So we need to very simplify, get straight to the point, and explain and get people to understand without us making forward statement, who get people to understand instinctively where this thing is going. And so we are in touch with major tier one marketing agencies and branding agencies, and we're going to choose one probably in the month of April, and we're going to start to work with them. In the meantime, that horrendous website is going to go down soon, and we're going to have a transitional website, and eventually that would be replaced with the new branding after. But we're not going to wait on that part. We're going to get at least the website simplify as much as possible and more current, and so that people can get an idea of what's happening. And obviously, we'll do a lot more of these things with you and others, and even by ourselves. A lot of the space communication and other type of interaction with shareholders. We're going to go back to mining conference. We're going to go back to technology conference. So there is a push now that's feasible because we do have something we can definitely market. It's not normal that you see other companies, and I'm happy for them. But they're putting results of a few thousand ppm of nickel over 2 meters, and they're getting crazy volumes, crazy increase in valuation. And we're putting stuff that should make us a contender for the next big discovery. And we're actually coming down. So it is, we need to move from a company that's its stock is being flipped on the daily to a company that is seen as a long-term investments, with people are willing to stash these shares away and allow us and give us the time to develop. And that's the same thing for the batteries. I got probably my last comment on this because I think I spoke too much already and I should have let Herb speak. But I got a text this morning with someone that sent me the lithium grant. And I, my hat to Enrico explaining the financing a little bit earlier. One thing I would say is that we've been in discussion with people, and yes, there's grant money. That's one thing, but people need to understand also, and maybe Enrico didn't do the distinction. There's grant and there's discretionary, and discretionary is when the politics jump in and give you money. That's in part when you get to the bigger amounts. That's what Lithium got, and I'm happy for them. Although if you look at their capex is still pretty large. There's still hundreds of millions of dollars. What they got so far in terms of money for us, it's pretty much our capex for the first commercial plant, not just pilot plant. And the person was saying, well, this is what they're doing and you're not there. Understand, discretionary money can come super fast, and it's a matter of securing every single aspect. Same comment I got about constantly tweaking the process, and somebody telling us stop tweaking and go to market already. Well, the people are giving us the batteries, and which is the biggest issue, access to the battery for this company, for EVSX. They want us to tweak to a certain level. And when we hit that level, all our problems are fixed. So there's nothing we do just because we like to sit on our hands and not have anything fast. But one thing I'm going to say, this other company that I mentioned started 2017, 2018. Already got a lot of grant money from the start, from inception. And hired a lot of lobbyists from inception. They've been at it for a while. We've been at it for 14 months. That's it, for maybe 15 by now. And so 14 months ago, we had nothing. This year, we're going to be processing batteries. So commercially, there's no way. I'm sorry if you think that's not fast enough. Leave. You're going to be constantly disappointed by us. And go find some pipe in the sky, pie in the sky and pipe dream company somewhere else that's going to promise you to go faster than that. But honestly, I don't think that anybody can sustain the pace we're going with the batteries right now. I don't believe so.
I think 14 months to bring it to where you have when you weren't even looking at batteries is pretty respectable. And Frank, I just want to thank you for that in-depth answer there, because one of the key aspects that I pick up on there is you're not just hiring fly-by-night newsletter writers or marketing firms and agencies that are going to bring in volume, run up your stock, and have the drop it. I see this so often in the mining world, and it's so disappointing. I've even worked alongside some of these firms and watched them run up some of our clients' stocks only to see them come down. And it just makes me hang my head and go, why? Why do these people do this? So I really appreciate the outlook on that front, and I respect that very much. So thank you for your time. I've kept you for a half an hour. I'm just going to jump in with I want to get his take on some of the exploration projects here, and we'll cut it off because this has been a pretty long one this morning. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.
Cheers. Herb, you can take yourself off mute there. Thanks for joining me today, buddy. How you been?
Pretty good. How are you?
I am terrific. I have wanted to get you on an interview for the longest time, so this is pretty cool to get you doing this live.
Okay.
All right, so let's talk about Julie first, because that's the first, that's the property that you and I visited together. I liked what I saw. I could see that you liked what you saw, but give us your impression of Julie.
Well, the main thing to take away from Julie is that the mineralization occurs in numerous rock types there, suggesting that it's really fault related and coming from something deeper. And so far we haven't found that, but what it's telling us is there's a good corridor of mineralization that goes through half a dozen different rock types. There we've got breccias in there that look very appealing, and we just have to sort out our structure and the bottom line, where the mineralization is coming from.
And this is a pretty big area. I mean, we visited 6-7 outcrops over like an 8-kilometer area. Like, this is huge.
Yeah, and it's got a little porphyry system off to the west that we're just starting to look at. So there's significant volume of metals there. It's just, where is the concentration?
So, Herb, when we were there, you and Mr. Bergeron, Frederick, who is the president of Magnor Exploration, the one who's heading up all of the drilling out there, you guys identified another outcrop not far from the actual discovery outcrop. And when you cut that rock open, it looks oddly familiar to the one that came out in the press release from Manicouagan. What's your take on that?
Well, again, the mineralization within that rock was virtually all iron. There's a little bit of nickel in it, but it's telling us that there's massive sulfides within that system, and I mean plus 70% sulfide. So that's an extremely interesting aspect to this, which suggests that this little outcrop that we found was a ripped up piece that came up from somewhere down below that's got a heck of a lot of iron in it. And hopefully, based on the other outcrops out there, that it's got some very good nickel, cobalt, and copper in it.
Excellent. Now, you've done some downhole geophysics at Julie as part of last year's program. Is that something that we can expect to see published in a report in some point this year?
That's a good question. We've got a report. I guess we need to probably make that more PR presentable and put it out there.
I'd love to see a report like that because I mean, I'm all about the geophysics, the drill hole locations, and I think it's really great when companies present those in an understandable fashion. And plus, it gives me some material to kind of work with. All right, let's jump away from Julie. Thank you for your input on that. Manicouagan, I didn't get to go there, and I'm really disappointed I didn't, but I was crunched for time. Maybe this year we'll get back up there. But man, Herb, 2 meters. These grades are just phenomenal. And you're a geologist, like you see this on a day-to-day basis. You have multiple exploration projects going on in Nevada. What do you take from this at Manicouagan?
Well, it's equivalent to, in my mind, it's equivalent to 1 to 2 ounce gold structure that is got to be chased up. And it's a major discovery, in my opinion, just based on the grades. And even though they are thin, and it's going to have to be an underground mine, not an open pit, huge deposit, it's still got a strike length in there that's intermittent throughout probably 10, 15 kilometers. So that's why we extended our claim block to cover a vaster, much larger area. And it's, even the geologists on site were saying, well, it's pretty narrow and I don't know, but when you add up all the platinum group elements, the palladium, the rhodium, the ruthenium, the osmium, and iridium values there, if you can process that properly and recover those, you're talking, closer to 4 ounce kind of gold values. So just to put it in perspective.
Man, I've witnessed mines that you go underground and they're mining a 1 meter wide nickel vein that's like 2% that doesn't have anywhere near the PGEs that this thing has. But this isn't just about that 4.5 meters. Did we not note 70 meters of sulfides, maybe not massive or semi-massive, but in that one hole 18, is there not 70 meters of disseminated sulfides? Because even if that comes in at like 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, I mean, I work with another company that's operating under a mine it's going to be a mine, and they're looking at like 0.3 or just under 0.3, but it's large tonnage, massive scale, a billion tons. But I mean, this could develop into something like that, could it not?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I have been looking at the values, and I just haven't put them together well enough to make a statement about how much disseminated. I know that there is disseminated low grade nickel, cobalt, and copper out there, and they're relatively widely dispersed. So there could be something much larger in a much lower grade, but I'm more focused on the higher grade at this point.
Okay, and so you guys did about 20 holes last year. You've got a bunch of samples that are going out. We're hoping to get those in the near term, but you've also got some historical stuff. Now, I want to talk to you about the historical stuff because a lot of people don't understand what it takes to compile a 43-101 resource estimate. Can you talk about what kind of meterage and drilling and exploration efforts are required to build a 43-101?
Well, you mean a 43-101 resource?
Yes.
Not just a 43-101. So yeah, we need to go back in and even though we have the core, we haven't sampled the mineralized intervals that were sampled originally. We would have to do that, but when you do that, the core was fairly small, so we'd lose a substantial amount that we wouldn't be able to go back to and look at. So I'm not too keen on doing that. In other words, we'd have to go back in and twin some of these holes. Gotcha. And at this point, I think it's a waste of time and money to twin holes that we have good values on. I think it's better to try to expand that resource and understand what's there. And I say resource, but in reality, this system.
Amazing. Well, Herb, thanks for your input on this. Do you have anything to add to Iceland? I know there was some stuff, some hiccups and whatnot throughout last year's exploration program, but it sounds like you've ironed out some kinks. Is there anything you'd like to add to the Iceland front?
I think it was successful in a technical way. We definitely provided more information on length of structure and depth of that structure. And we've come up with some ideas that we want to explore further. I hope to have a news release out in the near term. Not exactly sure when, but we should be putting out everything that we did for last year. And hopefully we can move on from there. But yeah, it was, it like you said, there were a lot of hiccups, and unfortunately we drilled from early September to almost the end of December, and we were getting about 10 meters a day. So there were a lot of issues with drilling.
Well, I mean, Iceland's never been really set up with geologists and exploration companies. It's not like you have a depth of manpower and drilling companies that can just pick up and go out there. So I kind of expected some hiccups along the way, but I'll be curious to see what comes out in this news release. Are there any other properties that you'd like to talk about that St. George has at this time, or I think you'd happy to keep?
Well, one that we haven't really discussed at all, we picked up a property last year late, and it's a niobium rare earth project that's hosted by carbonatite, which is similar to the nearby niobium mine. And I don't know who owns that now. It was who owns that? I forget now. Anyway, they're a producer. This one has literally niobium veins that are up to an inch thick, a couple centimeters thick. I haven't been on the property. I've seen the rock. I've assayed it. The rock assays well, both in rare earths separately from the niobium. So I'm excited to do more work there.
So is that a project that you're going to be doing any exploration on this year, or just at least get boots on the ground to start getting it for it?
Yeah, we're going to get some geology done on that and get more of a sense of the size and shape of it. And hopefully, if we are motivated enough by what we find on surface, we'll put some holes into it this year.
Amazing. Guys, I can't thank you enough. I expected to have Enrico on for a half an hour, but we just blew through an hour and a half with all three of you. A lot of great topics have been covered today, and I just want to thank you all immensely for taking the time on a Sunday of all days to join me and speak with me. So I'm your host, Mike Coyle. You've been listening to Inside Exploration Twitter Spaces. Look forward to doing this again soon. Bye now. Hey everyone. Thanks for tuning into our Twitter space today. If you enjoyed the content of our show, please subscribe to our channel and follow us at insidexploration.com. If you're looking for our social media handles, they can be found in the description below. Thanks again for joining us. I'm your host, Mike Coyle, and you're watching Inside Exploration.